What is the best way to lose fat or weight? Now, this is my most frequently asked question, and if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed, smash this like button, share the video with a friend, help me get categorized into the algorithm. So when it comes to having a really well-rounded physique, and like, let's say it's like a day they go to the beach or whatever the case may be, people always want to look lean because that's what's really impressive. You know, it's nice to have a lot of muscle, but typically what happens is when you have a higher amount of body fat, you kind of look bulky whenever you're in like normal clothes or you're like at the beach or whatever. And you tend to look your best when you're obviously at the gym with a pump, right? And I think that there's a really healthy balance, and people tend to way overcomplicate this. So I'm gonna try to break this down in a very simple way. When it comes to losing any kind of weight, you need to eat less calories than what your body uses to maintain its body weight. So for an example, let's just pretend that I need 2,000 calories a day, which is way less than what I actually need. But for this example, we'll use 2,000 calories. You want to aim to about maybe 300-ish calories less per day. And this can be either in the form of eating less or just increasing your calorie intake through like cardio. Maybe you do like, 300 calories burned on a cardio machine. The reason why you want to have this kind of range is because it will allow you to gradually drop in weight and body fat. And what tends to happen is people go on what's called a crash diet, where they just kind of starve themselves, or they're not having like a specific macronutrient or whatever the case may be. So that's obviously going to plummet your actual energy. Not to mention that you're going to be losing majority muscle, because your body is very sophisticated in the sense that it tries to maintain its body weight with whatever you're giving it. And if you go into these extremities, like if you're like crazy bulking or crazy cutting, you kind of shock your body in a bad way. In the sense that it's not going to work in your favor at all, because like, yes, you'll be losing a lot more weight, but you're gonna go into like the skinny fat kind of region, and you're just going to eat away mostly at your muscle while losing a little bit of fat. But overall, you're gonna look a lot better if you do this gradually, because if you can keep the muscle on your frame, then you can look leaner at higher body fat percentages anyway. So the best way that I would approach this is you want to look at your diet, and I always advocate for a flexible diet, right? So for me, I have a pretty flexible schedule, and I like to work on an empty stomach. I also like to train on an empty stomach, and that does take a little bit of time to get used to. And that's not necessarily something that you have to do, but this is a trick that I use to mitigate my calories and help me push most of my calories towards the end of the day when most people get their cravings anyway, right? So you want to have a well-balanced diet that's very sustainable, that doesn't really restrict you on the foods that you enjoy, because it kind of helps you combat these cravings. And so a trick that I like to do is, I'll have my first meal after my workout, which sometimes isn't until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever. And so what happens is you can have more calories and bigger meals when you push your calories towards the end of the day. Now, obviously, if you're somebody that has to wake up early in the morning, you have to go to work, I understand that, food does affect your mood. And so maybe it would make sense to have, sort of snacks throughout the day. Like, fruits are amazing. You can have like little like protein packed meals. But try to go, relatively speaking, very low calories, enough to where you can function. I also notice that whenever I have such an influx of food, like I'll have like a giant meal like in the morning, I feel like my mind isn't as clear. I have more brain fog. And so this just works out perfectly for me, because it allows me to enjoy the foods that I love. And then I'm also eating according to my goals. Now, this obviously works whether you're cutting or bulking, but for this example, we're going to cut, right? And there's two ways that you can have this calorie deficit, right? So if you're somebody that really loves food, well, then you can find some sort of cardio machine to where you're burning 300 to 400 calories a day, so that you're still putting yourself into that caloric deficit. But if you're somebody that, doesn't like to do cardio, or you don't really eat a lot, then you can obviously just do this in the form of, dieting, right? And the best way you can see if you're on track is you want to weigh yourself, like I said, every day in the morning, ideally under the same conditions, right? So like, after you go to the bathroom, you don't have any water, nothing like that. So you have a weekly average. And people tend to think if you mess up one day, then like the whole week is done. That's not true at all. So if you either go under or over one day, then what you would want to do is just balance out the whole week to where you're in an overall caloric deficit. And so that way you're going to have a weekly average, and you're going to ideally start to lose weight. Now, it's going to take a little while for your body to fluctuate, because obviously this is new to your body, right? So give yourself about maybe a week or two before you start making crazy adjustments. But again, what usually happens is whenever you start dialing in your calories, you tend to lose a little bit more initially, and then it kind of balances out over time. And so it's a lot easier to track. And that is pretty much the simplified way to basically lose body fat and weight while maintaining your muscle and just feeling a whole lot better. And ideally, that's going to contribute to you having a very impressive, well-rounded physique. If this is helpful content, if you have any questions or you're confused, feel free to drop those questions in the comments. I really want to help you guys lose fat, because I think that that's just everybody wants to look leaner, right? You can always look lean. There's like this like phrase, right? Like you can always look leaner, look better, be thinner. And I think that if you know, obviously if you look good, you feel good, and that invites just a whole better quality of life, in my opinion. And it also helps you create a better relationship with foods, because if you learn how to eat sustainably with foods that you enjoy, then it's not such a hassle, and you don't have to, you know, torture yourself with like all this crazy like fad diets or whatever the case may be. So again, ask me your questions and I'll be happy to answer them shortly. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.